This is D'Lo Brown. You better recognize this. The only podcast I pay attention to is the Ministry of Wrestling. Believe that.
Hey, yo, how you doing, guys? It's 2/5 of them boys, so you know what that means. We're here, and we are joined by a great star in the industry right now, and he's about to take place in one of the great tournaments in the Northwest Weekender with Burning Heart. I am talking about none other than the one and only Dijak. How you doing, sir?
I am doing fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Really honored that you're giving us your time. So thank you very much for that. So before we talk about the awesome tournament that's taking place with Burning Heart, just want to go back into the history of your career for a bit and just talk about how you came into wrestling. I mean, we know you've got like a major football background, a basketball background, you know, freestyle athlete. On top of that, you've got a criminal justice degree. Were you a wrestling fan? What was your passion or inspiration to get into the wrestling game?
Well, that's a great question. So I grew up as a pro wrestler. Well, not grow up. Grow up is a stretch. I was aware of pro wrestling as like a child, like a young child. Wasn't really sure where to watch it or where to get it though, right? This is back in the early 90s where it was like, I don't know, where do you find out what's on TV? You look at the TV guide or something and try to, I was, I was 6 years old, so I'd watch whatever was on TV. Ultimately, I ended up just watching whatever my brother watched. He started watching wrestling around 1998. So I was, I guess, 11 or 12 at that point. So that's when I started to really get into wrestling, was like Attitude Era, 98 through 2002, 2003, something like that, which is when I got into high school, which for us at that time, high school was like 9th grade. So 9th grade, 10th grade, that would have been 2002, 2003. That's when high school sports started to pick up for me. And when high school sports picked up, my practice schedule increased, and that's when I started watching wrestling less and less and less by each week. I'd say by the time I got into college, I was watching very little wrestling, just because I had no time for it. I was playing for 1 year. I was a scholarship athlete. You mentioned my football career, and then after that, I transferred to a smaller school so I could play football and basketball, American football, that is, and yeah, that kind of consumed my life until 2010 when I graduated. You mentioned the criminal justice degree. And then I started my master's degree in criminal justice. And while I was doing that, I found out that I had like a bunch of free time after I graduated with the master's degree. Even though I started my full-time job as a criminal investigator, I had a bunch of free time, and I started watching wrestling again because I had free time. So it was like whenever I had free time, I would watch wrestling. In my life, or in the the grand scope of my life after the age of 10. So long story short, I was a fan. And once I figured out, just by circumstance, that there was a pro wrestling school near me, which is the New England Pro Wrestling Academy, where I'm a trainer now in North Andover, Massachusetts, I just found out through a series of circumstances that school existed, and I emailed my trainer that night. His name is Brian Fury. I sent him an email that night about going to class, and I checked out of class, and I think I was enrolled as a student maybe like 2 months later. I think I did a fantasy camp after that just to make sure that it was right for me, and I loved every second of it. So yeah, we kind of been off to the races ever since then. It's just kind of enveloped and consumed my life since that day in 2012.
Awesome.
Yeah, that is awesome. And obviously, speaking of the career, then I know we're pressed for time, so we can't go in necessarily to your full run on the Indies and then Ring of Honor. So if it's okay, I'd like to get straight into NXT, which was one of my favorite parts of watching your career. Your run with Keith Lee, for instance, on the Black and Gold, absolutely awesome stuff. But when you got the call up from WWE, talk us through that. What was that feeling? How did you feel about transitioning, and how did you adapt to that roster?
The call up meaning to go to WWE, like to go to NXT, or go from NXT to Monday Night Raw?
Oh, we'll come to that, but to go to it, let's start by the call to go to NXT.
Good question. Wasn't a call, it was an email. It was from William Regal, who was basically the liaison that I had and that I knew, and he basically just communicated to me via email that WWE was interested in me and that they were going to offer me a contract. And then it kind of worked in like steps and phases where you like hear something and you're like, oh, that sounds great. And then, but like in pro wrestling, maybe in life, just in everything in general, there's sort of this for me anyway, as a human being, just my mindset going into stuff is I don't fully invest in something until it happens, until I'm sure it's going to happen, if that makes sense. So until I saw the email from Canyon, who was the head of talent relations, I was like, oh, okay, that's a thing that I'm told is happening, but it may or may not, right? And then Canyon says they're going to make me an offer, and I say, okay, that's once I see the contract, then it may or may not, and all of these things are based off of a lifetime of some of those things happening and some of them not. In this instance, it turned out to not happen right away because the original timeline for it was I was supposed to get the contract or the papers in January or February, and then some time goes by and there's a legal issue between Ring of Honor and WWE, and it turns out it got delayed by 6 months or whatever, right? The reality is it could have got delayed it could have not happened, right? That's why I never fully emotionally invest into something until it's set in stone, right? It's just the proper mindset to prevent yourself from overreaching or being emotionally disrupted or whatever phrase you want to give it. But ultimately we did end up getting through the contract process, and I started with WWE finally. And then even that was sort of a chip away sort of mentality, right? I started in the beginners class. It was funny. The story there is that the transition from the indies to WWE is I got the opportunity because of that big delay to be on PWG Battle of Los Angeles in 2017. So I asked them if I could do that because my contract was supposed to start that day. It just lined up where it was, I think it was August 1st or something, and the weekend of Bola was August 1st, 2nd, 3rd or something like that. So I was technically under contract, but I asked them if I could do one last indie date, and they were like, yeah, that'll be good for you. I ended up doing that. My last match was against Keith. Ended up being this big reception for it. It did very well. It got 5 stars from the Wrestling Observer Network newsletter. So yeah, I was like, oh, great. Going into WWE, I'll have all this momentum. And then it turned out that I was just in the beginners class, like learning how to lock up and learning how to roll. Like literally the next day, it was like Sunday I wrestled Keith, and then Monday I was in beginners class. So I was like, well, this is big, but that is what it is, right? Some people start off by jumping the world champion, and some people start off in beginners class. It's how they view you, and it's your perception, and you can either take it and do what you want with it, or you can be all grizzled and angry about it. I chose to view every opportunity as an opportunity, and I worked my ass off to continue to chip away. I was able to finally get on TV maybe 6 months later or something like that. It just became a process of trying to always overachieve, trying to always break expectations, right? And that became kind of the story of my WWE career, really, in a way.
Indeed. I mean, look, you say it started off as learning the beginners class, but NXT ends with you feuding with Keith once again, going for these titles, and it looks like it's that. And then you're attacked by Karrion Kross, who was literally the next champion that NXT had. And that leads you into the call-up of the NXT developmental into Monday Night Raw, which may not have been as exciting because, sorry to bring it up, I know it's not most people's highlight of Raw. Retribution.
I'll say this: it was very exciting for me in the time, for a few reasons, right? Like Monday Night Raw, getting called up to Monday Night Raw that's not a certainty, right? Like if you look at the percentages, most people don't make it out of NXT. So there was no point in my life where I was like, oh, I'm for sure going to get called up, and I'm for sure going to be right. It was, like I said, I started off in the beginners class. So my just getting there was a huge accomplishment for me. It was a huge step for my family monetarily, right? Like this puts us in a much better position, right? Because being a pro wrestler, you never know when your career is going to end or when you're not going to be on WWE anymore. So you need to make X amount of dollars before you literally can't physically do it anymore. So that was helpful, obviously, in a major sense. And then just the opportunity to be there and it seemed like, timing wise, not really, because when I was the call up itself, again, not as set in stone as you would hope. I had a conversation with Hunter right over the phone where he told me I was called up to Monday Night Raw. Awesome, great. It was odd to me that conversation was with Hunter and not with, whoever was running Raw at the time. Who was running Raw at the time was Paul Heyman. So I was like, oh, that's interesting that this call is from Hunter, not Paul Heyman. But whatever, right? It is what it is. And then I talked to Paul Heyman, and then the time was very transitionary where I don't know if you guys remember that window of time where he was running Raw and then he got quote unquote fired from that position and replaced by Bruce in some capacity, but Vince was also, it was just very odd and tumultuous, and we're in the middle of the pandemic, right? So obviously everyone's freaking out, and they're just trying to run the company day by day. They're not worried about who's getting called up or whatever. Obviously that's at the forefront of my mind. Timing wise, I ended up going up, coming back down. The contract didn't even happen really until I did the thing with Karrion Kross, like you mentioned. And then it was again, it was no this is kind of the story of my career too, is there was no definitive oh, now you're on. It was just kind of I never left the Raw roster, but I didn't have a main roster contract. And so I was just kind of in this weird, you're probably done with NXT, but we don't have anything for you on Raw. And no one's even saying these things to me. I'm just kind of assuming and guessing them. Because again, we're in the middle of the pandemic. So it's not who cares about what I'm thinking about, right? So ultimately, it all came to a head when the Retribution stuff started. And I said, look, I think I'm on the Raw roster. It's weird because, again, we're in this time when NXT people are in the crowd for some reason because we don't have real fans, and it's all at the Performance Center. So we're all there, but we're not there. And it's who's on the roster and who's not. They're using some people on Raw, but some of them are not. So I just said, look, I'm just going to go to Vince and I'm going to tell him. I had already gone to him once before just to introduce myself, and that apparently didn't go well. I heard, he never told me, but I heard through the grapevine. So the second time I go to him, I go, this whole Retribution thing is happening. I'm just going to volunteer myself for Retribution. I'm going to make a whole pitch. I'm going to put a bunch of names. I'm going to have a whole backstory, a bunch of stuff, and I'm going to pitch the whole thing. So I did that, and it worked in a way, but ultimately we end up on Monday Night Raw, but it's different than what I pitched. Now we're all in masks and we have weird names like T-Bar and Slapjack and stuff like that. So on the one hand, it's cool, great, this is working, and we all have we finally signed the contracts, and it's a featured act on Monday Night Raw. Now think about that, right? So even though it's weird and it's got all this and it's getting all this negative feedback online, at the end of the day, we still opened Monday Night Raw with the monologue. We closed Monday Night Raw with the final shot of standing over people. We destroy, right? So these are big, huge deals, right? These are the top acts in the professional wrestling industry of that time. So that's how we're looking at it. We're okay, we're the belle of the ball, right? We're getting an opportunity, even though it's a weird one, and we all have different names and faces, and there's all this backlash, and everyone online hates it, right? At least we're in this good position. If they love it, they being the Office and the Office being Vince, if he loves it, then we love it, right? End of story. We're going to work our asses off to make it work. Then he started to not love it for whatever reason, right? I'm guessing, I don't know this for sure. What I heard through the grapevine is that some executive at Fox didn't really care for it, and that's when it started to trend in the other direction. I don't know that to be the fact of the situation, but I heard that rumor, and the way the timeline matched up, that's what it seems to have been. Just a guess.
I hear you. Right, with time being on our side, we're going to go into Burning Heart, the big tournament. You're down in the UK once again. We've moved on from all these characters. You're Dijak, which is an awesome character, and you're taking on Robbie X in the first of this tournament. How do you feel taking on Robbie? And is there any other people in the tournament that you've got your eye on? We're talking Mark Haskins, we're talking Lycos, we're talking Trent Seven. How do you feel going into this tournament?
Super excited. I mean, I'm able to excuse my dog. He's not gonna.
It's all good.
He's decided that this is his interview now. So I'm super excited for the opportunity with Robbie X. This will be the second time we've had a matchup, and he's just a tremendous competitor, a tremendous wrestler. I can't wait for that matchup. Everyone else you mentioned, there's about half of them I've wrestled before. The other half I've not wrestled. Mark Haskins is a name that comes to mind. Lycos, like you mentioned, these are guys I've not been able to wrestle yet, but I'd love the opportunity to. And then there's guys like Trent who I've wrestled a number of times. Good friend. Just the list goes on and on, right? There's no difficult name on the list. There's no wrong answer, right? It's just a tremendous field, the tremendous amount of depth. I'm so excited. Every opportunity is a great opportunity. I just can't wait for it. All of those people are just as passionate about professional wrestling as me, and that's what I love about professional wrestling. I mean, Burning Heart is a very poetic name because we all feel the same way about professional wrestling.
That's the one for the wrestlers, by the wrestlers, and for the fans,
Yes.
and we love every minute of it.
Yeah, no, AJ and I were very, very blessed to have called that first Burning Heart pay-per-view, and we know a lot of these guys personally, obviously, and you know, we're looking at this tournament and we're thinking, Jesus, Dijak against X. Yeah, that I'd pay to watch that. Dijak against Y, Dijak against A, B, C, X, Y, Z. It was like, it's such an interesting tournament, this one. I think, as far as you're concerned, especially because bringing back your career history now, you know, in Ring of Honor, it looked like you were going to be champ, and then because of kind of kayfabe reasons, that didn't pan out. Likewise, in NXT, it looked like you were going to be that guy to take on the Keith Lee mantle, and then it looked like a pivot to Carrion. Surely you must feel like you're entering this tournament as a favorite.
Yeah. So the by the way, just a small pet peeve of mine. I think you used kayfabe where you meant shoot. I think you meant kayfabe.
Shoot, I'm
would be
sorry,
like,
you're quite right.
that's okay. Because of the Dijak Wrestling Academy and all the training I do at the New England Pro Wrestling Academy, I use those words super often to describe things, right? Because we talk a lot about how you feel in kayfabe and how this works, calling it as a shoot, right? The different aspects of it. So it's just a big sticking point for me from a mental approach. Not on you. It's not your job to know the definitive reasons. It's my job. I approach everything the same way. It doesn't matter where it is. It doesn't matter what it is. I'm there to have the best match on the card and to be the best pro wrestler in the world. That's it. That's how I view absolutely everything. Everything else, the chips may fall will fall as they may. That's how I've always approached it. That's how I always will approach it. My job now, when I've agreed to be somewhere, is to take that mindset approach it. Where I try to take a different mindset is when I'm working from a shoot like business standpoint, right? That's where I need to start approaching things from a where does a place want me and where do I fit in best with that company. So that's where I start to lean more into like an MLW, where we have to have a conversation about how they view me as a wrestler, how I view myself as an entity, right? Because I'm 37 years old right now. I still strongly feel that I'm in the prime of my career, and I think that's evidenced by the having NXT match of the year and things like that. I think the character is progressing in a way. I think my talking ability is progressing in a way where I was able to have more in-ring promos and stuff like that. I'm able to continue to progress that in MLW, even though I have a fantastic manager, St. Laurent. We have a good dynamic where he talks and I talk, and it's this good collaborative work in terms of progressing and building the character. Everything I do now is toward rebranding myself as a top player, as a top champion. So yes, I view myself very much in that light, especially in a tournament and a promotion as prestigious as Burning Heart Pro Wrestling. That's always how I'm going to view myself. That's always the way that the mindset that I'm going to go into everything with, is that I do feel that I'm the best professional wrestler in the world, and I need to start putting my money where my mouth is and improving that as a brand.
Well, that leads us really nicely into the rapid fire questions, because there's a few questions that I think are gonna not test you, but they're gonna lead to some really interesting answers based on what you've just said.
Super test.
All right, Dijak, your rapid fire match you're most proud to have competed in.
Iron Survivor Challenge 2023.
Your cheat meal.
Number 10 from Taco Bell. It's a grilled steak, cheesy burrito. I can't remember what it's called, but it's number 10 at Taco Bell.
If you had to skip a day in the gym, which day would it be? Back day, arm day, leg day, chest day?
I had to skip a day. I skip leg day, and the reason I skip leg day is because I get leg day when I'm in the because I don't want rubber legs when I'm wrestling, right? Like I'm a 270-pound guy who does springboards and climbs and jumps off the top rope. The last thing I need is for my legs to be tired when it's 20 minutes deep in a match. I'm doing a springboard. Like my legs are plenty big. I'm fine. I don't need to worry about people complaining that I can't squat enough or whatever. Like those are show numbers, right? Like I'm very happy with how my legs look and perform.
Of all the wrestling you've watched over the years, who had your favorite ring entrance music?
Oh wow. Just for nostalgia reasons, probably Stone Cold Steve Austin. Right.
Yeah,
obviously a lot
sure.
of that has to do with like how he was booked and how he's the champion and stuff like that. But it's just for my own nostalgia. Like you hear the music and you're like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever.
For sure. Your dream match with any current wrestler? There's your chance. Call your shot.
Yeah, I mean, if Brock Lesnar is still a current wrestler, I have no idea. Obviously, there's a lot going on with him and stuff. So he might be done wrestling. I have no idea. If I had to pick someone else, Randy Orton, even though we had a little bit of he and I wrestled on Monday Night Raw in like a multi-tag team match sort of thing. I want a singles match with Randy Orton. That would be number one.
Beautiful. Dream match with an opponent who no longer wrestles or is sadly no longer with us.
Oof. Probably The Undertaker.
Yeah, great answer. Can't fault that. The stiffest opponent you faced?
Stiff is such a relative term. There's so many different kinds of stiff. Like the stiffest chop I ever took was from Mark Briscoe. The stiffest punch I ever took was from Drew McIntyre or maybe Braun Strowman. The stiffest like kicks I've ever taken are from probably Matt Riddle, because he does like those UFC type kicks, but he doesn't have like kick pads on, so it's just his shin like shinning you. The stiffest like sleeper hold I've ever been in is Bobby Fish or Cross, because they both knocked me unconscious with their sleeper hold. That's probably more on me than their fault though, because I'm very like I'd be the worst UFC fighter in the world. Like as soon as I put any pressure on my carotid artery, I start like fading. So before I even had a chance to like say loosen up, I was already like waking up like, where am I? But yeah,
and the last one then, Dijak. Absolute last one, because I know they're giving me the red light now, and it's a bit of a tough one, so you've got to go. You've got to go quick here on this one. Your Rushmore of wrestlers.
You asked me the hardest question.
I know.
Mount Rushmore is a very subjective thing. There's different Mount Rushmores for different types of pro wrestling. So I always make mine by saying like the best in promos is like Stone Cold Steve Austin. The best in overall aura is like The Rock. The best in ring is probably like Brock Lesnar, and then the best in terms of all around everything all encompassed is Shawn Michaels. So let's say those four, just even though it changes every week for me.
Beautiful. Obviously going to be AJ and myself will be calling the 2-night Burning Heart event in Manchester and Liverpool this beginning of March. Dates are on the Burning Heart Instagram, and special plug for you, Dijak. You've obviously got your wrestling seminar happening up north, don't you? I know the tickets for the first one are sold out. And I believe there's still a few left. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct. Yeah. And if you can't make it in person to those, check out DijakWrestling.com. I'll give you all the seminar and feedback and information that you could possibly ever want about the world of professional wrestling. Whether you're a wrestler, whether you're a fan, whether you're in training, whatever level or stage you're at, I've got something for you. Check it out, DijakWrestling.com.
Beautiful.
Absolutely
Take
awesome,
us home,
sir.
AJ.
Thank you very much for your time. Guys, Burning Heart, check it out and be sure to sign up for the seminar. Until the next time, I'm the one, AJ Anthony Jordan.
I'm not throwing up the too sweet because he's got a rivalry with Bullet Club going at the moment, but I'm Double Vini Coloro.
Okay, Dijak, thank you very much. We're out. See ya.
Thank you.